Hello and welcome back. This is Paolo, your host, and this is Conversations in Artificial Intelligence. And today we go back to the world of science, technology, and deep R&D. With me today, we have Ricardo Baeza-Yates, who is the former lead for Yahoo Research and also the CTO at NTENT. How are you today?
Fine, Paolo. Thank you for the invitation to this interview.
So before we go any further, I want to thank you, whoever is coming back. And if you're new to the channel, it is an honor and privilege to have you here. So today's episode will cover a number of very interesting topics. And as you know, so far, we have looked into various elements of artificial intelligence. Today, we're going to go into covering a very interesting personal story that goes from academia to R&D and then eventually applied research. And also we're going to cover a sector of artificial intelligence that is probably one of the most interesting, and this is a search that has evolved from the early stages of the Yahoo and so on, has evolved today into a variety of ways and will further evolve. So we're going to look at what it is like today and what's going to happen in the future. So now Ricardo has a very, very extensive experience. So he was a professor at universities, and then he was hired from Yahoo to lead the research unit in Barcelona. And eventually he ended up being a CTO at NTENT. So tell us a little bit about what was the experience like to move from being a scientist in a university to being a scientist working for a large global corporate?
Well, that move was very interesting. The main motivation behind doing that was that I knew how to do research, I knew how to write papers, but it was not enough to have people reading what I did. I wanted to have people using what I did. So this was one motivation to move to industry. And the second, a very important one when that happened, is that I had the opportunity to build my own team. And basically building your own research team, I think is the best challenge for a researcher.
Tell us a little bit more about building the team. What was challenging at the same time and what was fulfilling, if you like?
So the challenge was to find the very talented people that wanted to come to Barcelona to work in this new European lab. And basically we're looking for young people with a brand new PhD. And I was lucky to find about 10 the first year. And basically just finding people with a lot of potential, mentor them to become senior researchers. I think that only that part is very rewarding, not only basically transferring research to products. For example, these people today, they work in all the big companies, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, so they're all over the world.
You drive personal satisfaction from the mentorship part of it. So the fact that today they have kind of learned from you and what you created as well, environment that you created, and now they went on and become known or have successful careers in a variety of companies.
Many people have told me later that for them they were maybe the best time of their life, because we had a really nice culture in Barcelona. We had people from more than 20 countries. Was really an amazing place to collaborate and to work together. There were no many boundaries, so people can collaborate with any other people. We were working in 5 different areas, of course, search, natural language processing, social media analysis, distributed systems, data mining, web data mining. But basically, just a mixture of different backgrounds and different expertise created a lot of new results, and also we won several awards and also, for example, new ideas for the Yahoo products.
So these are all very interesting topics here, and I'd like to, for a second, dig a little bit into managing an R&D team like this. What do you think are, if you like, the objective that an R&D manager should set up for the success of the organization? How do you define success, and how do you accomplish it?
So that's a very good question. I think there are several dimensions I would like to talk about. The 2 main ones, how do you measure the success, I think would be one. And the other one will be basically what you want on the people, basically driving that. So For example, I think the main measure of success is internal impact. So basically how you improve the products of the company. That may imply, for example, increasing the number of users, increasing the revenue. So that depends on basically the goals of the company. And that will be also measured with the alignment to the goals of the company. So basically improving the metrics and also aligning. Now, the other thing is that it's not enough to find talent. I think that's very important. You need to find talent, but also you need to find people that can work together. You can have like one crazy person to destroy a research lab. So for me, the social part is very important. And that means, for example, bringing people that not only is brilliant, but also that they can work well in a team, that they don't have any personal issues. And then you discover things in the way that are obvious, but for me they were interesting. For example, if you have people from many countries, it's very good to have at least two that they speak the same language. Because in any case, when they have a problem, they have someone to talk to. Because they want to talk to a friend first, not to their manager. So I think this thing was an interesting discovery in the way that we were creating the teams. So at the end, we have a lot of Italians. I think that was the majority, but we had 2 people that speak Greek, more than 2 people that speak Spanish, people that spoke English, and so on. And this was important. So basically, you need people that share the same culture to not feel like you're in a great research group, but also that you share the culture with some of them.
This is an interesting finding, and it's very interesting that you kind of formalize, because actually I experienced it many times, like especially the first years that I moved from one country to another. My first people to go to were people with my same nationality. I would like also to look at another aspect of this. Scientists tend to be people that on the one hand they're curious, on the other hand they also are usually very sensitive, and in a corporate environment there are pressures that come into these people. Like, how do you make sure that they are operating in an environment where they feel free to create and they don't feel kind of obliged or too much under pressure?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there are several ways to do that. So one is, I think there are more problems than people in any company. So, I mean, research problems. So I think you can always find a good match between what the person wants to do and the person, the company wants from the researchers. So this is one thing that they find arriving to the lab. So basically, you give them free time, look around, look for problems that you think that will be interesting for you, that you can solve, and so on. And basically, in my experience, in 1-2 months, they find more problems that they can solve, they can tackle, that they like. I think that's important. I mean, sometimes we have the idea that the person wants to do just one thing, and then that thing is not okay for the company. But I think you have a lot of flexibility when you look for new problems. The second part is like the famous 20% that many people comment about Google, like having one day for your research. I think you can always do that, but I always tell them it's not that difficult to find that one day are 5 days, because you can find the problem which is aligned with the goals of the company and also aligned with your passion, your expertise. And I never found a case where that was not true.
For our audience to understand, Ricardo led a real research unit. So real research unit means a unit where part of the research, at least, was a research that got published into academic papers. So they were pushing the envelope of what's possible and what's not possible. At the same time, this unit, as far as I understand, is also responsible to bring product to light. So how do you manage these 2 aspects?
I think a good way to answer this question would be to characterize the different projects, research projects that you have inside the company, because that will give you an idea of how they become product. And again, the alignment between the research and the products and the goals of the company is very important. And in some way also you need to be embedded, so you need to be good contacts with the engineering teams to know where are the pin points and the problems that they have. So basically, there are three, I would say there are three types of projects that you can have. One is basically a very large project that the company decides to do. For example, they want to redo a system. Let's say you decide to improve your search and redo most of the search. That project is easy in the sense that this is a company directive. You have to do it. No one will complain. You have to work together with engineering and other teams, and you have to do it. On the other hand, it's a very large project, will take some time. So it's hard in the sense of time and size, but in the sense of becoming a product, it's easy because it's what the company wants. It's like a directive from the CEO. You have to do this, you have to work together. I don't care what are the problems, you must make it work. The second kind of projects is a project that basically happen because you scout inside the company looking for things that you can improve. For example, you go to the engineering team that does search and you talk to them, and then you find out that they have a problem, and also you find out that you have a researcher or a group of researchers that can solve that problem. Those projects are much simpler, are much smaller, will go and prove a functionality very fast. And also, if you solve the project well, they don't have much friction because if the engineering team is interested in the result because you are helping them and you will improve their product. So if you have the buy-in from the product team, that will be the easiest project. And the last one, I think this one is the most difficult, is something that basically comes from research. Let's say you have invented a new functionality, something that is new, that is cool, and then you need to convince a product manager to put it in their roadmap for the year, that they should invest some resources like people and so on in this new idea and push this new functionality to the product. This is the hardest one because basically sometimes the product manager is not interested. Many times it's interesting, but they don't have enough resources, or they don't have time because they have to deliver things earlier. But these ones are the most interesting for research because you are putting something really, really new on front of the people.
Have you witnessed the cases where they were taken all the way to the market? And what were the challenges besides convincing the product manager? Let's suppose that we convince the product manager and budget is allocated and alignment is created.
I think that the main technical challenge was always scalability. So we will build a prototype, the prototype will work well, we prove the concept, but then one thing is to go from basically 1 user to 100 million users, or 1 billion users. Basically at that time Yahoo had 1 billion users. So this is the main problem. And sometimes you found that was very hard to do. Like you need to do more research to scale the product. But other times it was part of the design. So we always design based on scaling the number of users. And we had specific cases of products that we were using in the Yahoo search. For example, we had one that was very interesting about basically recognizing research queries, research in the sense of people trying to search for something like, let's say, buying a home or planning a travel, and then remember those queries, triggering them, and allow them to annotate things that they were doing. So basically, keeping the task and the state of the task. Also, we had something very good on query analytics that was much better than Google Analytics at that time. And then we found out there the second challenge. Sometimes the second challenge is that you have a beautiful idea, like the research queries. You can do it very well, but people don't use it because people is, in some sense, much simpler than you think. So basically that was running for like a year or more maybe, but basically the usage was so little that was discontinued. I call this the tyranny of the users, because basically they decide what is good and what is bad. Doesn't matter if it's a good invention or not from the research side.
So, there is a lot of debate in the world of innovation. One that I find it difficult to always agree, and it's this debate about inventions in search of applications. There is an entire school of thought that comes from Harvard Business Schools and consultants. They say you have to build a product based on your user research. So you do a research in a variety of ways. There are lots of complex and advanced methodology to do product research. And then you come up with define what product you want, and then you tell scientists and engineers what to build. But that's not the only way that actually innovation is brought to the world. There is also the other way, that is basically somebody comes up with an idea, and once in a while that idea actually finds a practical use. What is your personal take on this debate between these two ways of operating?
Oh, so for me, it's not a debate. I believe innovation is a continuum in these two extremes that you mentioned. I think you have a line, and sometimes you go to one side. For example, Steve Jobs will say that you need to start with the user experience, but Steve Jobs also did things that were completely new, like say an iPod. And then what you do is, okay, take the idea, try to find out what's the right user experience, and then do it. And for example, that case is just in the middle. You are doing some part with a new brilliant thing, and the second part, testing with people what will happen with this idea. So I don't think there's a debate. I think there's a continuum of possibilities where you combine these two streams.
So you were working in this kind of large corporate research lab, and then you moved to NTENT. So what was the difference? What was the experience like moving from that type of environment to a company that is instead more focused? It's again another company in search. And what was the experience like?
When I moved from basically being VP of research at Yahoo to being CTO of NTENT, I think there are several changes. So the first change is, as you said, going to a smaller company, and then things become easier because basically less people, less friction, you can drive better the technology, you decide more things in the technology, but there are less people involved. But also I moved to a C-level position, so basically I was able to build my own team again, but now more focused on applied research. There was a mixture of people that like to do research with many engineers, what I would call R&D engineers, and also that being the CTO, you can take almost all the decisions, so you can drive the technology much faster. So I think this is the two main things. Like you have less friction because the company is smaller, but also in a more higher position, you can basically drive the whole technology.
So how does the relationship between you and the people that work in the team also changes?
So first, I mean, the smaller companies are much more flat than big corporations. So you are, in some sense, much closer to the people. We didn't have many levels at Yahoo Labs. So basically, I think my distance was the same in the sense that you have managers that lead groups, and then you have the researchers. So the distance is like 2, is not far. But the difference now is that you went up to basically almost the first level. So now you only have 3 levels in the whole company. And I think that makes the relation more close. But basically, you are a bit more detached from the day-to-day management, because now you need to do other things. Like if you are at C-level, you need to take care of, for example, I take care of our office in Barcelona, so you need to do all the management part of the office and so on. So I think a lot of the key things on the research management go down from you to the managers you have. So I think the key thing there is the group manager. They have to be people that you trust very well, that you can delegate work, that basically they are proactive, that you don't have to think what they are doing. You know that they are doing well. And this is very important. I was lucky that I found people like that basically are your right and left hand, and also your brain sometimes. And then you can do multitasking in many other things and not to worry too much about the day-to-day research operation.
So we said that now the teams are more a combination of scientists and engineers, and they're more applied. But at the same time, you were bringing products to market at Yahoo as well. So I think it would help our audience to understand a little bit more what you're doing today. And how the process is different, the R&D, if you like, process is different than it used to be in a large company.
Yeah, so we do semantic search technology by using both text queries and also voice queries. And we are targeting the mobile device. So basically, it's a contextual semantic search. So very important thing is where the people is located, what language they speak, what is the culture. We use a lot of private data that comes from typically our clients or telcos, and the data comes from them. So you can think that we are hyper localizing the search experience for specific purposes of our clients, and we build the apps that do that. For example, the app will be a browser with a search inside our semantic search, and they will have access to local data, to private data of the client, and also some web data from the context that they are working with.
So building a product like this that is hyper-localized, is used as a mobile app, and leverages a variety of data that, if I understand correctly, they're not only the browsing data, there are all the telecom data. How does the process of building this product is different? And if you like, talk about this additional layer of data, what do they allow you to do? And how you have to manage the team basically to leverage this additional level of data.
So I want to emphasize that it's contextual data. For example, we really don't know who the user is, so we are very careful with privacy, so we don't have access to the personal data of the person. But the interesting part is that we try to predict the intent of what the person is trying to do. This is the key for semantic search. If you predict the intent, you don't want to show 10 results. You want to search the answer of the result. So it's difficult to search for the capital of Burkina Faso and finding a page that has capital in Burkina Faso. And if you're lucky, you have the answer to the question, which, by the way, is Ouagadougou. But it's different to answer that. So more like a question answering thing. Or, for example, if you're looking for a movie, given directly the place where you can buy the ticket for the movie. If you're looking for a business near you, for example, a restaurant of certain type, more something like what Google Maps will do. So basically try to find the best way to present the answer, which is exactly what the person wants. I mean, no time wasted in clicking. So the goal at the end is to basically have some direct answer for the user, and then the user experience is much better. For example, that means that we need to understand very well the language of the person. So because we use also voice, so we do we use like search services for the text, voice to text and text to voice part. But for example, for all the semantic part, we have our own knowledge database. We have a good combination of semantic technology with machine learning, including deep learning. So I think it's the best combination of all worlds.
What's important about this service is that it is hyper-localized and contextualized. So it tries to understand the context of that person at that particular moment. Mm-hmm. And the second thing is that the answer to the query, it's not just, so for example, if I look for movies, it's not just the movie, but it's more predicting what is the action that the person wants to do. Maybe he wants to go to a certain movie theater that is not too far away, that maybe is not too expensive, that maybe is cool to be, because those are the three things coming to my mind, because those are the things that I think when I go to the movie theater. So you try to anticipate also the actions of the person and provide an answer that is pointing towards an action that the person can take.
Yeah, and we're working also on that part. So basically, we have moved also to the assistant world, and we have a partnership with a hardware company where we have an assistant that basically can not only use a search, but then through our partners, they can do like all the smart home management. So basically, you have an assistant that understands very well your language, that can answer queries that are now more like natural language queries, and also that can manage your home, because we have this home automation partner. For example, if someone today search let's say, Giants game, and I'm here, most probably you will say, okay, he's talking about the Giants of San Francisco. I will give you the next game of that. But if you look for the games, you find out that the next game maybe is in 3 months because it's just starting the summer. And so it doesn't make sense that it's a game in San Francisco. But then you find out that that night there's a game of the Giants of New York. So the location context now changes to a temporal context because clearly he's not interested in the game, most probably not interested in the game that's 3 more months. He's interested in watching the game that is happening today.
Do you have kind of a library of contexts that is heuristic in nature, or you have an intelligence that is dedicated to understand the concept, the context to start with?
So we use combinations of, for example, combination technology. For example, the first thing here will be to find out that Giants is an entity that most of the time is a sports entity, that is a club. But then you have the ambiguity that there are 2 major clubs that have the same name. One in baseball and one in, don't remember, it's American football, I don't know. So the question is, what is the right one to use? So disambiguation is the key. And that part you can use machine learning to basically predict that in this case, the example I just gave you, the most important thing is the temporal context and not the geographical context.
So for a company to maintain an hyper-localized service like this, making partial use of machine learning, a partial use of building a dictionary, basically, there's going to be some operation that goes into that. So what is the complexity to maintain a granular world scale architecture for giving people hyper-localized search abilities?
The entity recognition also is done using machine learning because almost all NLP things today are done with machine learning. Where the semantic comes is that you have the knowledge base to recognize that the entity has more than one possible meaning and also has several attributes like location and sports. And then the third part will be the disambiguation to find out what is the right context, and that will be, again, another type of machine learning. But I think when you want to change language, which is, I think, the main part of your question, culture, well, you will need to train, again, the entity recognition because that in a different language that is different. So you will need to basically have different training data for every language and have a language-based entity recognizer. And also, if you go to the disambiguation, that part will be most of the time language independent because the context is the same type everywhere. And also the knowledge base in some sense is language independent, except the actual words that identify a concept. So for example, typically an ontology doesn't matter in which language you build it, it's language independent. But of course you need to have the translation of what is the name of every concept in every language. And then there are different approaches there. You don't need to translate everything. You can translate the most used things. So you can translate on demand. For example, you translate the thing that people are asking. So basically you can build like the language dependent part on the way while you develop your product, in the sense that the training you do and so on. So basically the data that you get for training and for, let's say, testing the product drives the construction of which part of the ontology has to be translated. But basically only the entity recognition in this example will be language dependent, and the rest only needs to be translated some part, but the rest is language independent. So we try to do everything language independent so it works on every country and every culture.
I'd like now to move a little bit to the future. The search is basically a crucial function in today's digital world. Where do you think things is going to go in the next 5 years? And what's be requested to go from semantic to meaning?
I think that the problem with voice is not really the search part, is the complexity of the context. So I think what it will change is the context is much harder to understand. Maybe you think it's obvious, but for example, when you are using text, usually there's only one person asking and you know that it's a single person in the context. But when you have an assistant where it's in a room and many people is talking, first you may have more than one person talking. So the context is, goes from one context to multiple contexts at the same time, and you need to recognize which is which. So you need not to only recognize what the voice is saying, but who is in the room saying that. The second thing is that, and there are funny videos about that, is that you need to recognize that the person is talking to the assistant, right? For example, there are funny videos of when they put two different systems from different companies talking together and they think they're talking to a person, but they're talking to each other. So this will be the other challenge. For example, let's say you are the one driving the conversation to the assistant and suddenly someone asks you something. Well, that question was for you, not the assistant. So the natural thing the assistant will be to answer the other question. But that's a different context. So if that's an ambiguous question in the context that the person was having, you will give the wrong answer. For example, the person was talking about baseball, and the other person does a question that is ambiguous and really was American football, then the things will go wrong. And then I can tell you more things that can go wrong. Like you can stop the conversation and come back in 10 minutes. You can mix conversations. Suddenly you are talking about planning a movie, and then you remember that you forgot to add something to your shopping list, and you say, add this to the shopping list, and then you come back to the movie, but then the assistant must understand that you are coming back to the movie, because you are not saying, you will not say, or people will not say, I'm coming back to my previous conversation, so you will not get lost. And all these things like iterations and many things that might happen that basically make the context much more complex, and basically it's a multi-context that has much more fuzziness and that you need to recognize. I think this is the real challenge, how to do a real user experience, because we are very good at recognizing this. Basically, to know which conversation is. For example, many Spanish or Italians can be talking like 3 conversations at the same time, all to each other, and talking at the same time, and they still can understand what is happening.
To basically summarize this, if you were a product manager, you would first of all prioritize the disambiguation of the interface between the search and the voice.
So in standard conversational systems, there is a last step that basically has to do with the practical part of the conversation, which is all these things that are not really about NLP, they're not really about semantics. These are really more about people's behavior, and that is unpredictable. So you will always have something that you cannot predict. So what do you do there? For example, today, systems are afraid to say, for example, that they don't know. Like, or for example, are afraid to say that they are lost. But I would prefer a system that is modest, that says, sorry, I don't know the answer to your question. Or for example, will say, I'm not sure if you're asking about this or about this. Can you precise? So basically, the assistant should ask for help, because we are much more complex than what the typical machine learning model will predict.
Machine learning has become such an interesting topic that everybody's talking about it. And everybody talks about these 3 words: machine learning, artificial intelligence, and deep learning. And sometimes in the same article, I found all of them one after one another. So can you tell us in 30 seconds the difference between artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, in your opinion?
Well, I always get like a bit mad when I read artificial intelligence and machine learning, because that would be like to say the egg and the yolk. So they don't understand that deep learning is a particular class of techniques inside machine learning, and that machine learning is a field that comes from artificial intelligence. And of course, artificial intelligence has much more. It has semantic technology, has knowledge bases, has ontologies. And we're trying to really mix everything in artificial intelligence, not only machine learning, but also the semantic part. So basically, it's a subset of the other. So we have like the egg is artificial intelligence, the yolk is machine learning, and deep learning is the nucleus of the yolk, the most interesting part.
I'll make sure that people on YouTube will learn about this. And for the time being, thank you so much for your time. Thank you, our audience. If you have questions about this specific video, please comment below. If you have any suggestion about similar content you want to see, just let me know through comments or reaching out through emails. Thank you so much, Ricardo. It was a pleasure having you here today.
Thank you. I enjoyed the interview. Thank you.